Hello, everyone, and welcome back. You're listening to the ZOE Japan podcast, and this is Yuri.
And this is Aneri. And today we have a very serious but very interesting topic. So today we are talking about virtual child sexual abuse material. And just a content warning, as always, this topic deals with really sensitive subjects or topics like pornography and sexual exploitation of children. So discretion is advised for listeners.
Yeah, and this is actually the second time that we covered this topic on our podcast. Our previous episode was released a few years ago with the title Child Porn Part 2. But there are so many new developments in this area, obviously, because technology moves very fast. And we thought it would be valuable and interesting to talk about it again today.
Yeah, that's right, Yuri. Especially in the area of AI or artificial intelligence, there are so many good things and bad things. And see, here I'm going already ahead of myself with this subject. But a lot of great developments. So I think just to make sure that we have the same base, maybe we can look at what virtual CSAM is.
Yeah. So firstly, just a reminder that we use the term child sexual abuse material, or CSAM to make it short. But the legal term here is still child pornography. So if you decide to do further research, if you're a listener on this podcast and try to do research, then these two terms are still used interchangeably in Japan. So what is CSAM? There are many categories of CSAM. But today, in our podcast, we'll focus virtual CSAM, and this refers to any nude or sexually explicit content that was created by using computer. So the child shown in the material is simulated or virtual. That means the child is not real.
And I think even with that definition, it's kind of hard to imagine what that looks like in Japan. So maybe if you can give us a couple of practical examples of virtual CSAM.
Sure. In Japan, the most well-known form of virtual CSAM is probably in our manga, known as comic, and anime stories. Many of these stories feature very explicit content of children engaging in sexual acts. Sometimes it can look very violent and exploitative, but everything was drawn by hand or created by computer based on the imagination of the artist. So no real child was directly exploited to create this type of content.
And if I'm correct, it's especially the hentai genre, right? That is very, very explicit. And for any foreigner that lives in Japan or for people that have been here as tourists, you will probably know exactly what we're talking about because it is just widely available. Every convenience store, every bookstore that you walk in, online, big billboard ads, everywhere you see something that would classify as virtual child sexual abuse material. So what is your opinion, Yuri? Why is it so widespread here in Japan?
I think we can talk about cultural stuff in a later episode, but simply it's protected by Japanese law. It's not illegal. If you look at the law against child prostitution and child pornography in Article 3, it specifically states that the rights and freedoms of citizens must be respected relating to cultural and artistic activity. Since manga and anime are very, very unique Japanese art forms, and it has lots of history too, right? The content in these materials are excluded from the definition of CSAM, and it still remains widely available.
And just for all the hardcore manga and anime fans out there, ZOE doesn't have anything against manga and anime.
Yeah.
Those are beautiful Japanese art forms. Our concern is when the sexual content in these materials are being used to groom children or perhaps even to affect the adult consumers of the content. So do you want to speak a little bit on that, specifically on the grooming side?
Yeah, as you say, this area is a big concern when it comes to grooming because this type of CSAM in manga and anime can be a really dangerous influence to children because it is widely read and viewed by almost all children. And when they see this type of sexual action featuring characters that look like they're in their age and, they look like little children or look like kids in teenage, they start to think this is a normal thing for them to engage in sex with each other or with adults because it's very casually drawn in that type of content. So if you keep on reading this type of or viewing this type of content, then it starts to affect your brain and how you
completely
view sex.
normalized. Yeah.
So children cannot always distinguish between fiction, fantasy, and reality, and therefore this content can have the same harmful effect as exposing them to real pornography at a young age.
You know, even though the material is not intended to be educational resources, it is serving as an educational resource. As you say, kids see it, and for them it is something that they can try themselves because these characters are doing it and it looks like fun. What would you say when we look at consumers, and let's talk about adult consumers of content that features virtual CSAM?
Yeah, I would say we have similar concerns for them as well. There have been some reports of adults that did not have any pedophile tendencies before, but after they are exposed to virtual CSAM, they developed fantasies and fetishes to exploit children, real children, behavior. And this is a behavior that is characteristic of pedophiles. And unfortunately, there is almost no academic research available in Japan on this topic. So there are a lot of opinions and public debate around this area, people who want to ban it, people who want to protect it.
Yeah, I'm afraid if I think back on that episode that you mentioned earlier, not much has changed since our last podcast then.
Yeah, sadly, that is true. But one thing that has changed is the rapid development of AI technology to combat this, right? So can you share more about this area?
Yes, I can get very excited about this area. So it's really been a roller coaster ride, especially the last, I would say, year and a half for ZOE, just to learn about this area. And there are a lot of good things and a lot of bad things happening with AI.
Sure.
So I'll start with the bad things, then we can end on a high note. So on the negative side, we are really hearing reports from all over the world on how CSAM content producers are using generative AI to create photorealistic content of children. A lot of big new words in there. So maybe if I put it in more simple terms, basically someone that used to use a camera and film a real child can now use an AI tool and type very specific instructions. So I want a child, this age group, this nationality, boy or girl, in this pose, in this location. So very, very specific instructions. And then at the click of a button, that AI tool will create an image that looks exactly like a real photo of a real child. And it just comes from thousands of existing images where actual children have been exploited. And I think back of a training session a while back that I joined where the trainer showed us images created by AI and just regular photos. And it was really impossible to distinguish between those two. You really need an expert eye and additional tools to help you differentiate and see this is AI and this is non-AI. So a lot of content being produced using these tools now.
Wow. And what about AI being used to create nude images of real children?
Yeah. What you're talking about there is the nudification tools.
Okay.
So here you can take a photo of an adult or a child and upload it into these tools and, again, click a button and it would add a nude body to the face of that child. And it would be age appropriate according to what the child's age is, or you can play around with different settings there. And we just have a lot of concerns with this technology. You know, it is being used to create, of course, virtual CSAM. And sometimes I'm thinking of a case in Europe a while back where a group of teenage boys decided to create these images of girls in their classroom. And several girls in the school were targeted and suddenly found that nude images of them were circulating on the web.
Wow.
You know, sometimes celebrity children's images are used and a nudification is done to those images. So something that can sometimes look like innocent fun to play with, especially for people that are not informed about the risks, but can be really damaging to the victim of those images.
Wow. And that's very shocking to hear as a parent also, because, you know, as parents, we always post pictures of our kids, maybe not naked, right? Obviously not, but we just post their smiling and doing activities in a pool or whatever. But those photos can also be used to create that type of image. And that is very scary. Yeah. And even at ZOE Japan hotline, we also received cases like that where the nude body was created by the software, the nude body of the victim who came to, ask for help, the children were still very traumatized because those images were spread to their friends and family. And the victim told us that the pictures look very realistic. The perpetrator even used the same color of the clothes that he was wearing that day, and also type of shirt. It was a video. It was even a video. It was not just a one picture, but a video of him self-pleasuring. So he said that if this video was spread to his friends, every single person will believe it's him. So he was very traumatized and scared.
I think that reminds me, Yuri, that something that we need to be extremely clear on is that AI-generated CSAM is not a victimless crime. This example that you just gave us, this young boy was not touched by anyone. There was no physical abuse, but the trauma was exactly the same for this child. And just imagine for our listeners, your child or a child in your family that suddenly finds sexually explicit content of themselves out on the internet and their friends all think it's real. So it really, really just leaves destruction in its path. And then for those images that are not nudified images, that are new images being created, we need to remember that these images are created based on existing images of actual children that were exploited. And as you pointed out earlier, there's more and more research pointing toward people that did not have a specific fantasy to exploit children, but because of exposure to this content, and it will become easier and easier to be exposed to it because of the content that's generated, they have developed these pedophile tendencies. And I hope that we can get a lot more research in this area soon so that we can learn how to combat it more effectively.
Yeah, that's awesome, because this is devastating for these children who are victims of AI CSAM, because they didn't really engage in any kind of sexual acts with the perpetrator, but just to, that type of photo that he posted on his Instagram or social media is used, and it looks very realistic, that he's engaging type of sexual act. And a lot of the victims who reached out to us said that they want to take their own lives and, just go somewhere that nobody knows him. But it's just really sad to think about this. But we also remind them that it's not the end yet. They still have hope, and we can provide solutions to their problems. So I think it's important that we talk about this topic with hope that there's a solution and there's something that we can do together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you have any other concerns with AI CSAM?
I'd definitely say a big concern is for law enforcement. If we look at the volume of content that is being produced, and worldwide we are already hearing that investigators are struggling, receiving so many reports reported by the public or by victims themselves, and sometimes they are spending hours or weeks or months trying to get all the clues so that they can track down this child that is being abused, so that they can rescue this child, just to realize that the image was AI generated and there is no real victim to rescue. And that's just a big waste of resources that could have been invested in a child that really desperately needs to be rescued out of a situation. And just to put it into perspective, I was surprised a while back, the Yomiuri Shimbun news outlet in Japan, they interviewed a CSAM producer, a virtual CSAM producer, and this was in December 2023. And I just want to quote from their article.
Okay.
So a male office worker in his 50s in the Kanto region said, "I once created more than 1,000 images in a single day. And since around May this year, the man has been absorbed in a free image-generating AI tool he learned about online. He has so far posted more than 4,000 sexual images of children alone."
Oh, my goodness.
The man said he earns tens of thousands of yen a month from selling such AI-generated images.
Wow.
Huge volumes.
That is very shocking to hear. And I can imagine, because it's just a click of a button, then you can create that type of image. Then you can just create unlimited amount of virtual or AI CSAM in a day. But yeah, again, like you said, it could take months for a police officer to filter those type of images and contents and try to split real versus AI generated images. So it's a lot of work and time.
And this is just one producer that we're talking about, but there are thousands of producers all over the world. And because of the law that you mentioned earlier in Japan, most forms of virtual CSAM are protected by the law. We are seeing that in many cases, Japan is becoming a hosting platform for this content. So you might have a perpetrator in a different country creating virtual CSAM, and because it is illegal in their country, they are distributing or hosting their content on a server in Japan. So that, of course, as a country is a big concern for us, and just to see how we can work through that.
Wow. So that means that even if one country makes this type of content illegal, but they can go to another country hosting site and then just keep on doing the same thing. That is very sad and depressing to hear. But you mentioned earlier that there's a good side, right? As well to AI technology. So can we talk about that?
Yes, and that is exciting. It's actually very exciting. I think that the bad guys are using it for bad purposes, but the good guys are doing the opposite. So over the last couple of months, we have interviewed different organizations and just tried to learn as much as possible about this area. And there are so many wonderful CSAM hotlines around the world and law enforcement teams around the world that are using AI for good. They're using these AI tools to find potential perpetrators or to track down content online that might be CSAM. And then that content is analyzed by a real human being that can just confirm whether or not those images are illegal. So I think that there's just a lot of potential as these tools develop and grow more for us to fight AI with AI. You know, the robots against the robots. It's like a science fiction movie. But I think we really need to be able to use these tools to our advantage. And it's happening already, and it's wonderful, and we need more of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, good guys are doing amazing work and effort to combat this crime. So that's very encouraging to hear. And even for listeners today, you know, virtual CSAM is really an area where anybody can get involved. If you see any kind of sexual or erotic content online, or and then you suspect that that is a child, please report it to the website or social media platform, and they will try to take that content down, and also report the URL to the internet hotline.jp. This is the government-approved hotline analyzing these images and removing them from the internet.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great resource, and we'll be sure to put the link in the notes section of the podcast, so it's easy to access. For those listeners that are outside of Japan, I can recommend that you look at the InHope website. We'll put the link again in the notes. And InHope is just a network of more than 50 hotlines around the world, so you can find your country, the best place to report that URL, and you won't get into any trouble for doing it. So, yeah, it would be wonderful to just find that hotline and report the cases and help us to get the content down.
That's awesome. And you don't have to be an expert in AI technology or IT specialist to report these type of contents, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you know how to copy a URL, you can join the fight and you can report those links. And so please, every listener, help us to identify that content.
That's awesome. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode. Thank you again for listening and joining the fight to reach every person and rescue every child.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Please support ZOE Japan. With your help, we can reach every person and rescue every child.